We come now to chapter 20, the realm of creative delight. So we're in the Deva realms, slowly ascending, and the previous one was the Sucitto Devas, and then the next one up is the Narrated Devas. So the Pali here is Narrated Deva Saddhamanusave Sung Narratinang Devanang Sadang Sutva Paranimita Vasavati Deva Saddhamanusave Sung Paranimita Vasavati Nang Devanang Sadang Sutva. And the painting that we have here, as you can see if you can pass around the books, this is very intricate and so a kind of lattice work of images, and this represents the I believe these 5 Dhyani Buddhas. The text Ajahn Sucitto will describe, it goes into some detail, but it's getting more and more so colourful and spacious and intricate at the same time. The Dhamma wheel has almost completely vanished from view by all of the sort of dazzling phantasmagoria and different coloured Buddhas and these images sort of radiating off into the distances and the sort of wash of colour behind. So in the midst of all the brilliant light, the Dhamma wheel has been sort of lost in the glare. Like when you're driving into the sun, it's so bright that you can't actually see where you're going. So this is the realm of creative delight, and the English translation of the Pali means the Narrated Devas cried out with one voice, and when they heard the cry of the Narrated Devas, the Paranimita Vasavati Devas cried out with one voice. In these two realms, the Narati and the Paranimita Vasavati, we find the Devas of creation, that's the Narati Devas, and the Devas who delight in the creations of others, the Paranimita Vasavati Devas. As you can imagine, these are even more refined and long-lived than the Sucitto Devas. The Narati Devas abide at almost magical levels of consciousness, where the mind is so light and unburdened with temporality or form that it can create and sustain images according to its wishes. The Paranimita Vasavati Devas are one step further on from having to make the effort to create images of existence. They merely abide in the enjoyment of what has been created. They never question the purpose or result of those creations, but appreciate them for their own sake. The mortal earth realm has been left far behind, and with it such considerations as impermanence, purpose, cause and effect. They rejoice to hear that the Dhamma has been taught, but it's probably because they perceived the flash of light and heard the rejoicing from below. This is a happiness that could easily lead to indolence and decadence, and, fittingly enough, one of the 2 monarchs who rule over the Paranimita Vasavati realm is Mara, the Lord of Delusion, whom we have met many times before. The other monarch is in another quarter of the realm and doesn't even know of Mara's existence. It seems to me that there's a very clear message here about this kind of bliss. So this is an interesting bit of Buddhist mythology, just like Lucifer, the Satan figure of the Bible. Lucifer means the being of light, or the bright one, and Lucifer was the highest of and brightest of the archangels. And because Lucifer started a rebellion and wanted to seize power up in the heavens, and then got cast down into the hell realms. But Mara is similarly, one of the aspects of Mara is not just as the being that's coming along to the Buddha and other people trying to tempt them or trick them out of their insight, but Mara is also the ruler of the highest of the sensual heavens. So what you call the 7th heaven, the Paranimita Vasavati heaven, is the 7th level of the heavenly realms, just before you get into the Brahma Loka. So it's the highest of the Kama Loka, the sensual heavens, and Mara is the boss, is the king of the highest of the sensual heavens. So that's a message, and so that in a way it's comparable to that sort of brilliant, radiant, powerful nature that Lucifer had before the fall, and that there's an easy comparison to make there. maybe this is a good point to do a little digression on Mara, because according to some mythologies, there are 5 Maras. And just as I was talking about the 50 skandha demon states, you've got 10 demon states for each of the 5 khandhas. You've got a Mara that is the ruler of each of the 5 khandhas. And this is in the southern Buddhist mythology. So the first one is called Machu Mara, which is related to Rupa, or the form khandha. Machu means the killer. So Machu Mara is the killer. So that Mara rules over the act of killing and physical death. Then the second Mara, related to the feeling khandha, Vedana, is Kilesa Mara, or the Mara of defilements, desire and hatred. So that when you are walking past the fridge and you think, ooh, time for something sweet, maybe there's some ice cream in there. That's probably Kilesa Mara talking. Of course, you might actually need some ice cream, but that's another issue. But probably just Kilesa Mara talking. So that's Mara of feeling. And then the third one is Khandha Mara, and that's the Mara that is the identification with the body and the personality. So it's that Mara, which is when the Buddha says, "I have seen you, builder of the house." Just his enlightenment is the first statement that occurs to the Buddha internally after he's been fully and completely liberated. He says, "I have seen you, builder of the house. The ridgepole is broken and the rafters are smashed. You'll never build another house again." So relating to Mara as that which identifies with the body and the personality and says, that is who and what I am. That is the reality. So Khandha Mara is the identification with the habit of identification and self-view. Then the next one is Abhisankara Mara, which is to do with the realm of thinking. So Mara in the realm of thought. So that's believing your opinions. So when you say, well, it's not an opinion, it's a fact. That's probably Mara speaking. Any of you ever had that thought? It's not an opinion, it's a fact. I'm right, you're wrong. You're a good person, but you're just wrong. That's Abhisankara Mara is talking at that point. It says, this particular idea or this thought is somehow an ultimate reality. And then the last one, which is the one that's being referred to here, is called Devaputta Mara, which is the son of the Devas. Devaputta means son of the Devas. So that Mara is the one who's the boss of the Paranimitta Vasavati heaven, the king of the highest of the sensual heavens. So basically, the whole Kama Loka, the whole realm of beings born in the sensual worlds, in what the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, the hell realms, and all the Deva realms, the earth spirits, the heaven of the 33, and all the other Deva realms. That's called the Kama Loka, or the realm of sense desire. Mara is the king of that whole realm. So he's the satanic majesty of that is the ruler of this realm. And so that often in Buddhist mythology, then when you have people who reach enlightenment, there's this Mara has this kind of almost like a sort of comic villain aspect when it comes along and says, "Curses, another one slipped through my net." And that when a being is enlightened, then one escapes from Mara's net, and then there's this, that Mara is supposed to be in charge, he's supposed to be the ruler and the king, and someone's escaped from Mara's realm. So that kind of language is used quite often, and it's because Mara is the dominant force of the sensory, the sort of sense desire realm. It's also the fact that Brahma doesn't mean that Brahmas can't be under the influence of Mara too. There's certainly instances of that you find in the teachings. When the Buddha goes to visit a Brahma god called Baka, who who's under the illusion that he is the creator of the universe, and the Buddha, because this Brahma Bhakka was a teacher of the Buddha in a previous life, and he picks up this delusion that this Brahma God thinks that he's the creator and of the universe, and he's the Almighty and the most powerful of deities. And so the Buddha picks up this thought through the airwaves and says, "Oh dear, my former teachers really lost it. I better go and give them some help." And so he beams up into the Brahma world and has this dialogue with Bhakka, who's under the influence of Mara. So even though these are talked about in sort of mythological terms, these stories do have a continual relevance for us, because how many of us have had people who are like our boss at work, or the head of our faculty, or the abbot of your monastery, or senior nun, who is under the delusion that they are the Lord of the universe, or the Queen, the Queen of all creation, and they think, "Oh dear," and how can we break it to him that he's actually not the omniscient and almighty? He's just the head of the art department, But we can easily labour under that, and then the way that the Buddha always teaches Mara, and when there are these encounters with Mara in the scriptures, it's always through wisdom, through clarity of vision and wisdom, that Mara is defeated, so that force of delusion, for the distorted thinking, is always conquered, if you can use such a word, is always dissolved by clear seeing. That's how the force of distorted thinking is say understood and known. So it's never like a head-to-head fight, but rather the way that the force of delusion and self-view is conquered is always through awakening, through wisdom. So let's continue. Creation is a magical act. It is the ability to produce simulacra. It's a wonderful word. Who would like to tell me what that means? We had it the other day. So simulacra means images that represent something similar. So that say that it's something is like a drawing of a clock would be a simulacra. Like it's representing that object. It is the ability to produce simulacra of living or non-living entities, and even images of principles and thought. Creation ranges from physical procreation to everyday speech, whereby whole realms of experience are reproduced in the mind of another, to literature and the fine arts. The arts can use mundane objects, but through metaphor and other forms of craft evoke higher meanings and implications in the mind of the receiver or the viewer. These meanings may be reflections on the significance or purpose of life, or the relationship of the human and the universal. Creation should, therefore, be seen as a sacred act. In mythology and ancient civilization, it was sacred. Creative acts were presided over by deities and attended by or prepared for with rites, ceremonies, and priests who were there to move the minds of the participants away from the instincts of self. Art was a magical act, originated perhaps to evoke and commune with the spirits of the creatures that were being painted, as with the cave paintings of creatures in the hunt at Lascaux in France, and the ancient cave paintings in the early people who lived there in those caves in France. Poetry and literature established the values, the inspiration, and the aspiration of the society. What an ecstasy of stillness for those creators, and what awe and rapture for those who reviewed and were enriched with their creations. This creative impulse can also be traced in the development of Buddhist art. The Buddha himself taught in different styles. One style that was used employed high lyrical verse as a form called gathas. The Arahant disciples also left traces of their enlightenment in poetic form, collected as the Theragatha and the Therigatha. These different forms of expression should be borne in mind, so that we don't expect anything attributed to the Buddha to fit into a prosaic, rational view. Although the Buddha did not encourage artistic representations of himself, tradition has it that he agreed to the representation of the 6 realms as a teaching device. After the Buddha's passing away, the wish to establish sacred images as icons of the qualities of the Buddha, or as visual metaphors for the furtherance of the Dhamma, naturally led to a swelling stream of poetry and visual arts. These forms of expression were very important for the largely non-literate and polylingual civilization of the Buddhist empires. The story of how they evolved and their importance is quite long, but I'll cut it short to fit this painting. Maybe before we get on to that, just going back a little bit about magic and words and such. The one very significant little teaching that the Buddha gave was, he said, there are 2 kinds of miracle. There's the miracle of psychic power, for being able to read people's minds, or fly through the air, or look into past lives, or to see or hear things at great distances. So that's the miracle of psychic power. And then there's the miracle of instruction. So that you can hear words, you can understand the meaning of the words, that understanding can catalyze, can trigger the awakening of understanding and insight within you, and the heart can be liberated from hearing words. So that's called the miracle of instruction. And he said, of these 2, the miracle of instruction is the superior. And so that is something that you come across quite often. If you read the suttas, at the end of the sutta it's saying that, all the people who were gathered there, so many became stream enterers, so many became once returners, non-returners, so many became arahants. And so that just through hearing the teaching and understanding the teaching, then that should also be considered miraculous, that can come about. There's even an instance where where a monk became enlightened, became an arahant, hearing his own Dhamma talk. So Sister Kamika is named after him. We're still waiting. So he was giving a Dhamma talk, explaining something to his friends, and as he was doing the explanation, then he was liberated, hearing his own teaching. And you might think that's a sort of ancient history and such like, but also Ajahn Chah always spoke in a very spontaneous way. He never prepared anything, and a year or 2 ago, when I was talking with Lumpur Sumedho, he said that when they were first given a reel-to-reel tape recorder back in the early 60s at Wat Pah Pong, Ajahn Chah was really interested in this and was quite keen on recording teachings, and was going to visit various other forest ajahns and recording their teachings, and also that very often at Wat Pah Pong, then when he was giving a talk or answering questions, then they would switch the sort of reel-to-reel tape recorder on, and then and Lumpur Sumedho was saying one day, Lumpur Cha asked him, "Oh, Sumedho, did you record, or did somebody record that teaching I was giving this afternoon?" And he said, "Oh, I don't think so, Lumpur. I think the tape recorder was somewhere else." He said, "Oh, that's a shame. That was really interesting. That was really interesting what I said. I wanted to hear that again, because I'd never heard it before. I never thought of it before, and I can't remember what I said, but I know it was good." So, to continue. After about 1,000 years in India, Buddhism had developed its literature and commentaries. During that time, many lineages of practice and theory arose and passed away. The more established vital centres of Buddhist theory were in Nalanda, near Bodh Gaya, where an enormous university housed up to 20,000 students, in nearby Odantapura, and in Vikramashila in West Bengal. In these places, many of the Mahayana and Vajrayana teachings were established. By the 8th and 9th centuries of the Christian era, they were still flourishing, while all the lands to the west came under the influence of Islam. That meant a later form of Buddhism, the Vajrayana, could only be transmitted due north into Nepal and Tibet, or across the sea to Indonesia, rather than along the now inaccessible routes from Afghanistan into China, because before Afghanistan and Pakistan, that was the center of the Buddhist world. So from the time of Alexander, when they had the Greek invasions of India, that area, Taxila and Peshawar of today, and where the Bamiyan, the huge standing Buddhas in Afghanistan. So that whole area, that was the center of the Buddhist world for several centuries. But then when Islam came in the 8th, 9th century, then that completely blocked the sort of the ancient routes from India into China, and so that ceased to become a Buddhist center. And as he's saying that the center of Buddhist activity moved further off to the northeast, and then up into Tibet and Nepal. One feature of Buddhism as it appears in Mahayana and Vajrayana forms is the development of the Buddha from a solitary sage to a principle of enlightenment. This principle is embodied and manifests in many places and over a large span of time. It's a nice thing to think about. One Buddha is good, therefore two are twice as good, and so on. The historical Buddha, Gautama, is reported to have made reference to a whole lineage of 27 preceding awakened ones. Some may doubt this, but for the purposes of mythological and poetic truth, there's no reason why one shouldn't have Buddhas everywhere. If their presence encourages the quality of awe and selfless attention to the present moment, if it develops the faculty of faith, if it helps to counterbalance the materialistic concerns of life, it has a purpose. As a historical account, it's not of much use anyway. In the Vajrayana, 5 Buddha forms have crystallized to convey this universality of Buddha nature. The number 5 signifies the 4 cardinal directions and the center. These are called the 5 dhyani Buddhas. That is, they are for the purpose of meditation, called jhana in Sanskrit or jhana in Pali, chan in Chinese and zen in Japanese. So dhyani Buddhas, one can learn to visualize them, practice devotion to them, or reflect upon their qualities. And so that's he's referring to the image here. So this is representing his own configuration of the 5 dhyani Buddhas, sort of in a square form, a diamond-shaped form here, and then with the hands in the mudra at the center. The central one is Vairochana, whose name means radiant. He is generally white and is depicted with his hands in the Dhammacakkappavattana mudra. This is the Buddha that proclaims the Dhamma, the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination. His position is central. Here I repeat the mudra throughout the painting, recognizing that this, teaching the Dhamma, is still the fundamental significance of a Samma Sambuddha, one who is completely self-enlightened. Beginning on the right and proceeding counterclockwise, the next Buddha is Akshobhya, the Buddha of the East. His color is blue, his epithet, imperturbable. This is the Buddha at the moment of enlightenment, knowing how it actually is and repelling all delusion. His hand is in the earth-touching mudra. This is the mindfulness mudra, much used in Southeast Asia as the epitome of Dhamma practice. So that's this one over here. So a blue background and a golden-coloured robe there, and a sort of bluish tint to the skin. Akshobhya. In the south is Ratna Sambhava, traditionally painted yellow. Ratna is a jewel, so this is an emblem of the precious gifts of the Buddha mind. The hand mudra is that of generosity. Nowadays this image is generally found in Tibet and Nepal, where Vajrayana practitioners revere the boundless Dhamma gifts of the Buddha. The Buddha of the West is called Amitabha. Like Akshobhya, this image was established before the Islamic conquest of Afghanistan and Pakistan, and thence travelled to China and Japan, where it became very popular. In fact, a whole school arose based upon devotion to this one Buddha, called the Pure Land School. Herein, Amitabha, also known as Amida, is the Buddha of the Western Paradise. He promises that all who sincerely put their faith in him will be reborn in a Western Paradise and work out their way to Nirvana from there. Of course, the catch is in what you take sincerely to mean. I would think it implies a lot more than a few recitations and prayers. Faith is made sincere by effort, mindfulness, concentration and discernment, then it certainly will get you to a pure state of mind. The fact that Amitabha is the Buddha portrayed in the posture of meditation seems to indicate that purity is not attained by paying lip service to the teaching alone. Actually, if used insightfully, Amitabha is a fine, transcending teacher. His purpose is to cut, with a mind of faith and insight, to the root perception that one is not enlightened and that one has to do something to become enlightened. As we have seen, this self-view, this identification with the habit-bound mind, can never be transcended by any actions proceeding from the sense of self. So in the Pure Land practice, the meditator abandons that view and proceeds from the basis of being one with the Buddha of bliss. You can't do that by thinking about it, only through faith born of a powerful commitment. The last of the Dhyani Buddhas is Amoghasiddhi, the Buddha of the north. His color is green and his hand is in the Abhaya Mudra, the sign of fearlessness. This Buddha's characteristic is the all-accomplishing wisdom which is attained by means of the dispassionate, selfless activity of an awakened one. Such activity is all-accomplishing because when there is no personal bias, and yet a full commitment to the welfare of others, love and insight operate in an unfaltering way. Amoghasiddhi never demands that people live up to any expectations, can never be disappointed, and hence never gives up on compassionate activity. Content to hold up the Dhamma in the fearlessness mudra, he acts in an unconditioned refuge. He acts as an unconditioned refuge, with no discrimination and no thought of result. Amoghasiddhi is a symbol of the equanimity that is regarded as the highest form of love. So that's a lot of stuff. You won't be tested on this. So that's Amoghasiddhi at the top there, surrounded by green. So that's also the fearlessness mudra is the left hand held up like that. In this particular image, and then the Dana mudra down at the bottom for Ratnasambhava is the hand held out like that with the palm outwards. There's a few interesting things to say about all of this. Firstly, just starting off with Amoghasiddhi, if you go to the great stupa of Borobudur in Indonesia, the stupa is a whole sort of symbolic storytelling device and a spiritual symbol all brought together. So the lowest levels have stone carved reliefs of the lives of the Buddha's previous lives as a bodhisattva. Then at another level up, you have stories from the life of the Buddha, and then another level up, then you stop having any kind of human representations, and it goes from a square form to a circular form, and then you have the little bell-shaped stupas like the one we have out in the meadow there. That's a copy of one of the small stupas from Borobudur. So it goes from the Buddha's previous lives, and all the pictures there are lots of rough and tumble and activity of the Jatakas, and then the Buddha's life story, and that's much more sort of serene and composed. Then human representation of stories and things that stops, and you just get the square form of the lower portion of the stupa, and then that is like a large square platform, and then from inside that you have the circular forms beginning. So you have the smaller bell-shaped stupas in rings, and you have one layer which has square holes in, and then the next layer up has diamond-shaped holes in the stupas. And inside the stupa there's a Buddha image in inside each of these little bell-shaped stupas. And the one at the top of the highest square layer of the stupa, you have the Buddha Amoghasiddhi, rupas of Amoghasiddhi sitting side by side all the way around, and they're all in the fearlessness mudra, so that they're sort of repelling danger from all sides, so that they're sort of knee to knee all the way around that top portion. And then the higher up you go, the more invisible the Buddha is. So with the little bell-shaped stupas, the square holes are quite large, and then the diamond holes are a little bit smaller, and then you get right to the top, the stupa right on the very top of the whole shrine. It's completely walled in, and so that when the British came, Sir Stamford Raffles, I think it was, discovered the Borobudur stupa completely covered over the jungle, and they started digging away, and they uncovered the great stupa. When they opened up that top portion of it, they found that there was a rupa inside, but it was half finished. So one of the hands sort of melded into the leg, and part of the face was uncarved. And they thought, oh well, because they were going to seal it into this chamber, they didn't bother finishing it. But like if you're going to build 100-foot high stone shrine, you're going to have it. You're not going to be doing any cost-cutting moves. Like, don't pay the sculptor for another couple of days' work. He doesn't have to do a whole hand. It's more the symbol of going from the clear human images of the past lives, and then the Buddha's lifetime. In the Buddha's lifetime, the Buddha's never represented in human form. So you see that there's a sort of the radiance under the Bodhi tree, but there's no human figure there, and such like. Just the footprints or the space under the Bodhi tree or the empty chair and so on. And then the further up you go, then the Buddha is more and more invisible and hidden away, until finally you get this image of sort of, it's half rock, half person. Is the Buddha there? Is he gone? So to me that's a very significant way of representing the unapprehendability of the Buddha. Actually, I'm not quite sure about the representation of him in his life story, whether there's he's represented in a human form or not. I think it's not, but I have to check up on that. But also, I was mentioning the other day that the earliest Buddha images came with the Greeks, and they started representing the Buddha as like a Greek god. So the earliest Buddha images that they found in India were very much the Greek style of sculpture. But in the Northern Buddhist tradition, they have legends that even during the Buddha's lifetime, there was an image made of him when he went off to spend the 3 months of the rains retreat to visit the Deva who'd been his mother. They said that I think it was King Udena was very upset that the Buddha was going to be going away, and so he asked if an image could be carved to represent the Buddha, so that he could make offerings and pay respects to this image. And it's said that image was created out of sandalwood during the Buddha's lifetime, and that there's copies of that original image that made their way to China. Whether it's true or not, I'm not sure, but the actual representation of the Buddha as a Buddha Rupa, then there are some stories that say that goes back all the way to his own lifetime. If you remember, also Ajahn Sucitto saying about how as things developed over time, that the sort of Buddhist iconography and mythology got more and more complicated, and as he says here that one Buddha is good, therefore two is twice as good, and then we have the chant of the 28 Buddhas that we recite, Namo me sabba buddhanam, that is a reference to that that comes from the Pali scriptures, that preceding list of 28 Buddhas all the way back to Tanhankara, way back in the mists of time. But in the Northern Buddhist tradition, they also have even more complicated and multifaceted traditions, so that they say there's inconceivable numbers of Buddhas, that were sort of present, all sitting under their Bodhi trees before the Buddha's enlightenment, and then they were already in existence. Kind of innumerable numbers of Buddhas were already in existence, and then during what we call the Buddha's lifetime, there was just a sort of he sort of did a little performance in the human world, sort of coming into being and carrying out the acts of the Buddha in the human world. And but even after the Parinibbana, he still carried on, or this gazillions of Buddhas all carried on afterwards, so that the lifetime 2,500 years ago, which seemed to be one person traveling around northeast India teaching, that was just a performance. That was just like a manifestation. And actually, you've got uncountable numbers of Buddhas that were around before and are still around now in inconceivable numbers of dimensions simultaneously. So You get those kind of teachings in, I think, in the flower adornment scripture and other teachings. And so, just as Ajahn Sucitto is referring to the northern tradition here and its complexities, that's another. He doesn't mention that here, but that's another sort of slightly mind-boggling a concept of, uncountable numbers of Buddhas that were existing in the past, existing in the future, existing in the present, in uncountable numbers of places now. And so it's a different kind of mythology, but it's also in a way representing this is what happens with in the realm of creative delight. It just these images sort of feed on each other and get more and more complicated, more and more colorful, more and more intricate, more and more multifaceted, and they can be so complex and so colorful that you actually end up forgetting, oh yeah, dukkha. Oh, dukkha because of clinging. Stop the clinging, dukkha stops. Right. So that's part of the problematic quality of the realm of creative delight, is it can get a little bit over creative, and when things are over embellished, then the beauty and the power of the teaching gets lost in all of the decoration. So when I was in Japan with Lumpur Sumedho a few years ago, and Ajahn Amaro and others, and we were visiting some Shingon temples. The Shingon ones are the most sort of seem to be most inclined in this way. So you go to a shrine in a Shingon temple, and there's this beautiful old temple building, but the shrine is so big that the only room for the people is like a little walkway around the edge. So that it would be like this sala with 95% of the space in this room being the shrine, and the actual space for the people is just a little bit of a walkway around the edge. Because the shrine is fantastically beautiful with lanterns and rupas and radiant images, and ta-da! It's a big shrine. When you see it, you go, wow! But there's no room for the people. So it's and you think, well, there's a wonderful effulgent expression of devotion, but it's somehow along the way it's losing its practicality of being a room to sit in and to reflect upon spiritual qualities, because there's no the shrine is so the shrine fills the whole space, so that the actual human factor is not really able to enter into it. Then maybe the last thing to comment on this, what's called Pure Land Buddhism. And so people might have the impression that this is an artifact of the northern Buddhist world, but it does have very clear roots in the Theravada teachings. And just as Ajahn Sucitto very politely puts it, slightly barbed, but mostly polite. I would think it implies a lot more than a few recitations and prayers. So within the northern Buddhist world, the mythology, if I understand it correctly, is if you recite Namo Amitabha Buddha, Namo Amitofo, if you recite the homage to Amitabha Buddha with great sincerity and with great commitment, then that the strength of that practice will bring about your rebirth in the Western paradise, and that it will be then from in the Western paradise that you will eventually attain perfect enlightenment. So that does have a parallel within the southern Buddhist world, because you have these 5 Brahma realms that are called the Suddhavasa, and they are the highest of the Brahma realms of form. So before you get to the formless realms, which are the top 4 Brahma realms, just below that you've got these 5 that are called the Suddhavasa, which means the pure abodes, or the pure lands. Suddha means pure, Avasa means a land or a realm or a living place. But in the Pali tradition, the Suddhavasa is where anagamis get reborn. So if you reach the 3rd level of enlightenment during this lifetime, then the place where you'll be reborn, and why an anagami means a non-returner, that you can't be reborn in the human realm. So you're born in one of these 5 Brahma realms, the Suddhavasa, and then you're guaranteed to realize total enlightenment from that pure abode. And so that over time developed into Pure Land Buddhism. The element of having to be an anagami before you get reborn there somehow got lost along the way. And so it's that reciting the name of Amitabha Buddha and developing that quality of pure faith, which is obviously a useful thing, but within the Pali tradition, if you reach the level of anagami, then you're reborn in the pure abodes, so that became I think mythologically became a very attractive option, because it's like, well, hey, if I get reborn in the Pure Land, then that means I have a really, 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 really long, pleasant retirement in a really nice place, and then I become an arahant from there. Hey, well, you might as well have a nice, long, comfortable retirement before you pop off the wheel. So why bother with arahantship now? Just hold back a bit, make it to the Pure Land, to the Suddhavasa, and then you can be enlightened from there. Yay! So with a worldly take on it, that's how my own understanding of a likely sequence of things, because for many people the idea of not being born again is a bit off-putting, because they're attached to their friends and their pets and their home and their country and the seasons and so on. And so the idea of never being born again, not being born again into this world, so that it's natural that because of a worldly misunderstanding of the idea of not being born again, then there's a sort of this halfway house of, well, I could cope with 84,000 eons in the realm of bliss before I pop off the wheel. That sounds okay. I can cope with that. And so the whole concept of being reborn in the Pure Lands became a kind of goal in itself. And I hope I'm not misrepresenting Pure Land Buddhism too incorrectly, but I've been around a lot of northern Buddhist monasteries and teachings, and so that's how I see it, that mythology took shape. Essentially, these Dhyani Buddhas are meant to be objects of contemplation, to remind us of the practice and of the mind which gives rise to awakening. All of these Dhyani Buddhas are believed to be offshoots of a supreme Adhi Buddha, or cosmic over-Buddha, who never actually manifests in any form at all. He remains a potential for awakening in the universe, although Dhyani Buddhas are manifestations of that one single potential. On these 5 Buddha modes, I have evolved 28 figures corresponding to the lineage of the 28 Buddhas described in a Theravada Sutta, the Atanatya Sutta, number 32 in the Digha Nikaya, and also in an apocryphal book of verses, the Buddha Vamsa. There are a few references made in the Pali Canon to previous Buddhas, suggesting that Gautama Buddha was not the only one, and that he rediscovered rather than created the Dhamma teachings. These references also indicate a continuum of spiritual purity that continues to manifest in the world. Although the lineage of the 28 Buddhas predates the manifestation of the Dhyani Buddhas, both serve as a reflection to encourage faith. To talk a little bit more about so he's got these extra Buddhas around. He's got the 5 in the middle here, but then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So 28 altogether. The 28 Buddhas is a chant that is done to, it's a sort of, it's the absolute industrial strength, guaranteed demon dispeller. So if you've got a haunted house, or if you've got some kind of afflicted state that you think is due to some kind of ill will or some sort of demonic problem, 28 Buddhas is the sort of supreme demon dispeller. And again, in the Atanatya Sutta in the Digha Nikaya, the dynamic is where the king Vesavana, who's the king of the Yakas, comes along to the Buddha and says, Venerable Sir, I have a problem that some of my subjects are very faithful. They have a devotion towards you, and they have a sort of respectful relationship to your disciples. But others of my subjects are unruly. They are aggressive. They are wild. They are uncontrolled. And so, in order to help your disciples to be protected, I would like to recite a verse that then your disciples can repeat, so that then if any of my yakas attack or cause any problems, they will be in trouble, so that your disciples will be protected. And then he recites this verse, which is similar but not identical to the one that we recite. And he says at the end of it to the Buddha, so do you approve of this offering, and do you feel that it will in fact be useful to protect your disciples? And the Buddha says, yes, thank you very much, that's very good, that will do, that will do the job. And so that then, since that time, then when people go to places, or they're worried about their being possessed by demons, or they feel a place is haunted or whatever, then they will recite the 28 Buddhas as a sort of supreme protection. And again, you can think, if you're allergic to demons and yakas and the whole cosmological realm, it's quite okay, because if your demons are completely internal and they are your feelings of jealousy, or your feelings of insecurity, or your feelings of rage about your ex-wife, or your government, and those are your demons, reciting the names of 28 Buddhas and their qualities is a very good thing to do in terms of processing your own inner demons, that it's not just all out there in some sort of ethereal realm, but it's what we're talking about. The protection is, just like he says, the Adi Buddha, the formless supreme Buddha. That is essentially your own wisdom, the awake capacity of your own mind. That quality of awakened knowing of your own heart. That is really the Adi Buddha. That's the supreme root Buddha. Is that quality of your own being, so that the protection that gives, the dispeller of demons and maras and so on, is because you're choosing to be awake, you're choosing to be aware and to know, and that's the great demon dispelling protection. So then, maybe just to finish the chapter, these forms and others like them became popular because one can retain them more clearly in the mind. If you're not steeped in contemplative ways of thought, say you're a farmer planting paddy fields behind the water buffalo, and relativity and ultimate emptiness of conditioned phenomena means much less than the idea that the Buddha has compassion for you and will help you if you do good. Even for a contemplative, these images give the mind something more tangible to focus upon, and this is their sacredness. But a creation can also become a hindrance. In order for it to be sacred, we should not be drawn into the creation or into its creator. The highest aim of creation is to indicate the uncreated. Poetry that succeeds in this endeavour reminds us of silence and of the cessation of thought as the true source of fullness. Visual arts remind us of the ephemeral nature of form and its dance with space. However, creations get profaned by self-view and become obsessive and narcissistic. Words and speech are profaned because they are used to heighten the ego sense or to project the ego's wishes onto the universe. Sexuality is profaned into self-gratification and power fantasies. The same is true of religious forms and conventions. We can use them as objects to blindly worship and project our desires onto, or to throw at each other. So the creation of Buddhas can lead to asking favours of images and making offerings to them for good luck, or to sectarian strife. All the additions to a religious form can have great vitality in them, but if clung to blindly, they can obscure spiritual goals with cultural and metaphysical incrustations. The development of styles, lineages, and conventions is a natural thing, like the growth of a plant. While a tree grows, the systems that transport nutrition remain quite delicate. Its life-giving sap is carried through a fine ring of wood between the bark and the heartwood. The heartwood, which is there just to support the mass of the tree, becomes more and more massive, but it's not where the life really is. Of course, the tree needs the support to hold the mass of leaves up, so the heartwood is not useless. But if you want maple syrup, you know where to look. That's in the bit between the bark and the heartwood. What we have to consciously aim for, and what we often neglect in the bliss of creation, is the way of transcendence, the uncreated, that which is beyond form. It is to this that the wheel of the Dhamma, the Four Noble Truths, points. There may be other ways, but this path is the shortcut. It does not attract energies that entangle and delude. And in this painting, as in many of the cultural and metaphysical accumulations around the Buddha's words, the wheel of the Dhamma has faded in significance. Here it is just a few spokes of light emanating from Vairochana's mudra. In the realm above, the light is even fainter. Paranimita Vasavati nang deva nang sadang suttava. When they heard the cry of the Paranimita Vasavati devas, then formless rapture, the Brahmaloka, comes next. So we'll leave the Brahmas for another day, but that is Ajahn Sucitto's reflections on the creation, and also he was very conscious of the fact that he was creating a set of paintings to illuminate the sutta, and also then creating a series of lectures that he gave with slides of the paintings, and then this book, creating the book to go with the pictures. And so he had creation on his mind. But I feel that's a very important point, that the highest aim of creation is to indicate the uncreated. And so that is something that that's what a great artist recognizes, that the work of art is primarily there to cause a change in the experience of the listener or the viewer. It's what James Joyce called an epiphany. That's what the purpose of it is. Like it creates that aha, that wordless awakening shift of awareness in a change of being in the person who's hearing or seeing or experiencing the artwork. And so that it's, as he says, that the greatest purpose of art is to indicate or to evoke the uncreated. And how art can so easily be, as he said, it's sort of I forget the phraseology, creations get profaned by self-view and become obsessive and narcissistic. And that's it can be kind of really degraded. I remember, I think it was a Punch cartoon once. Remember Punch magazine? And it was a couple of people standing in a gallery, and one painting was a pound sign and then 10,000. So huge numbers on this painting, and then the next painting said 15,000, and then the next painting said 5,600, and they're standing there saying, I think that commercialism has unfortunately really got a hold of his spirit these days, and the paintings are just dissolved into a price tag, and that's all the paintings were just the amount of money that people were expected to pay for them. But I think we can all relate to that, where the being known as the artist, and that the artist's name is what makes something impressive or significant, rather than the immediate impact of the artwork. And it's also significant that many of the great works of art, that they have no idea who the creator was, who created that sculpture, or who designed the Chartres Cathedral. They have no idea. As far as I know, there's no record of the architect. One of the great works of art of the Western world. Who designed it? There's no indication that there's the name of the architect was not recorded. So, but yet that has the impact. So it can easily be that it's more important. It's a new piece by person X, rather than this is a beautiful sound or powerful image or a fascinating, creation in and of itself, and that it's more the ego trip of the creator becomes the purpose. As usual, please, any questions or reflections, Walter?
Ajahn, I would like to ask about, in regard to creation, about the background of the art object in front of the Abbot's kuti.
Mm-hmm. Johannes von Stumm was the sculptor, and the story goes that let's think, how was it? It was, I think, there was this a woman here who was a nun, Sister Upala, and she was a concert pianist before she was a nun. She was in her 80s when she came here. And she had a friend called Oscar Yarbrough, who was also a musician and an artistic type. And I think what happened was that Oscar took Lumpur Sumedho out one day for a dana in London and took him to an art gallery. And they were, and Lumpur likes to do that from time to time, often with George Sharp as well, who's also an artist. And they were going through this exhibition of sculptures, and they came across a smaller version of that same sculpture. And Lumpur said, "Oh, that's a very Buddhist sculpture. It's really interesting." And then Oscar, who was quite a successful artist and musician, and therefore had a bit of moolah, said, "Okay, well, I'll see what can be done." And so he looked into it, and then he found that the sculptor, Johannes von Stumm, had done a few versions of that same sculpture, some smaller, some larger. And so Oscar purchased that one. And I think it was also because Lumpur was in that kuti, and then there was a Buddha image that was originally standing right there in the middle of the path. And then when then Lumpur realized, well, it's a shame that the Buddha's standing there because I can't see past it. You know, it's taller than the window, so I'd like to be able to see over the top. So then the Buddha image got moved, and then Oscar acquired this sculpture and put it in place. And so during this time, the sculptor I wasn't particularly aware of its Buddhist implications, of it, so that there's a being that's not there. I mean, he knew that. I mean, he created the sculpture. But then when he found out, when Oscar purchased it and said he's going to take it to a Buddhist monastery, it's like, oh, fantastic. So then he was really excited about the fact that Ajahn Sumedho was interested in his sculpture and thought it was a very insightful and interesting and beautiful piece. And so then he was very delighted. I don't think he gave it away free, but I think he made a small reduction for Oscar, and that's how he came to be there. And it's interesting because I live in that kuti, so I often see people kind of coming and looking at the sculpture, or I pass by them on the path, or kids climb onto it and into it. And it's very interesting the number of people who don't realize what it is. That they'll sort of ask, "Oh, what is it? Does it represent something?" You know, what? Or they'll talk about, no, it's an elephant. It's an elephant. You can see there are the trunk. There's two elephants. You can see the tusks. You know, and what they create. And I say, and it's very interesting that they invent their own story. Were you here when it was? Were you Upatak for Lumpur when it was?
Oh yeah. Not when it was brought. It was already here. But I always take school groups to see it. I just get them around there and ask them, okay, what is it? And it's interesting. Probably about 90% of them don't get it. But there's always one really smart one.
Because you have to be right in front of it to really see that it's a human figure. And if people are standing at the side, they're going. But you can look his name up on the. He's got a website with other sculptures of his. Johannes von Stumm. Yes, Sharian.
You mentioned mudras, and particularly the mudra of fearlessness. And I have a small standing Buddha rupa, which is shown in that mudra, but also has the right hand turned outwards. So sort of pointing towards the earth, but not touching the earth. So what are they?
So that they're like that?
Yeah, like that, two in combination.
I'd have to look it up, but funnily enough, that's the mudra that the Buddha image that was supposed to, the sandalwood Buddha that was made for King Udena, according to the stories, that it's in that mudra. It's a standing Buddha with one hand up and one hand down. There is a book in the library called Mudra, that it would probably be good to go and look it up there, because I'm not sure. It's like a very thorough. It's originally a Japanese book, but it's a very thorough description of all the different mudras and what they mean. But I can't remember off the top of my head what that one is. Yes, Nevin.
Often when, sort of like Theravada or Thai traditions, when they talk, they sort of talk about, I find it quite strange that people, well, it seems quite strange that, the Nama Amitabha Butsu, that sort of more of a homage thing, but in the Theravada tradition, you have the Paritta chanting, so you're chanting to the realms that you've just been describing, so gods and celestial forces. And often when, like this evening, some Sri Lankan people come and they said, where do we go to pray, And it seems very strange, coming from a Christian tradition where we would sort of think the Buddhists pray, It's kind of, it all seems a bit the same, really, if you really look at it, but it's sort of like Buddhists have this thing, we don't pray, but maybe we do in a way.
Depends which Buddhist you talk to.
Exactly, yeah. And who too,
Well, yeah, it's very interesting how in the Buddhist tradition it's much more of a to whom. Well, and it's the Southern Buddhist world. It's a sort of to whom it may concern. And when we do the parittas, it's you literally send out an invitation at the beginning. You say to any, and you make it's a list to any of the beings around the universal system who might be favourably disposed towards lending their goodwill. The yakas, the gandharvas, the earth spirits, the devas, brahmas. It's like you send nagas. You send out a like an invitation. Any being in any realm who's out there who wants to lend a hand, please do show up if you want. And so that you do have that same kind of the calling upon invisible forces, but that it's not so structured. And also, it's very interesting how there's a description of John Blofeld going to visit Master Shu Yun's monastery back in the 50s, I think it was, maybe. When John Blofeld spoke very fluent Chinese, lived in China, and it would have been somewhere around like 1950 or 52, and he went to visit Master Shu Yun, who's a very, very old, great, highly revered master of different lineages of Buddhism, but he was known mostly as a master of Chan Buddhism. And so John Blofeld went to visit his monastery and was being given a little bit of a tour around, and when he came back and was paying his respects to Master Shu Yun again, he said that I'm surprised. I thought this monastery, your monastery of any places, it would be like a pure Chan monastery, that you wouldn't have all these other bodhisattvas and shrines and all this kind of other superstitious paraphernalia. I thought this was a pure Chan monastery. Just that's nothing but enlightenment is the way. And then Master Shu Yun said to him, well, when Farmer, that's like Ajahn Sucitto was saying there, that when Farmer Wang comes and says, I'm worried about the rice harvest this year, can you help? am I going to talk to him about the unconditioned mind? That's not going to be something he can relate to. So you have to use expedient means to relate to people on the level that they can understand, and in terms and in a language that is meaningful to them. Otherwise, it has no value. It's nothing they can relate to. And so then that's why I think last time, I don't know if you were here a couple of days ago when I was, or maybe was it yesterday?
Probably last night.
Yeah, maybe last night, I forget. But saying that, particularly because in the West you have a lot of Western Buddhists who are skeptical materialist type Buddhists who shrivel at the idea of past lives and future lives, and devas and nagas and yakas are who kind of can't deal with those ideas. They don't like them. They don't. We've had a skeptical materialist upbringing and education, and that's the world that we know. So fair enough. So the idea of dragons and devas and pixies and brahmas is really off-putting, or doesn't seem realistic. So whenever I'm doing the parittas and doing a blessing like that, I always make a kind of qualifying statement at the beginning for people who are allergic to pixies and brahmas and dragons and yakas, celestial musicians, that if you don't like the idea of that kind of thing, you can look at this as inviting the bright forces within you to come to the surface, rather than the bright forces outside to come in. It's the brightness, the devas, the bright ones, the bright forces of your own nature to come to the surface. And then what I always say is, whether it's outside coming in or inside coming out, it's the same thing. And that I'm not sure that everybody who I've ever said that to has completely gone along with it, but to me it encapsulates the spirit of it. And like in Japanese Buddhism, you have Jiriki and Tariki. The Pure Land Buddhism and Zen Buddhism sit side by side, and it also within in most temples, even in the most sort of strict Zen temples, they still have shrines to Fudo and to Maitreya, or to the Kishti Garbha, to Guanyin, Kanon, Bodhisattva. And so there's even in the most sort of pure Zen places, you've got all kinds of other shrines and deities around and about. So it's to hold it in that same spirit, that you are considering or using or relating to those forms, but not being superstitious about it, or not not seeing that that everything that's good is coming from outside, but also that like Jiriki means self-power, which is the way of Zen, and then Tariki is other power, which is the way of Pure Land Buddhism. But seeing that those different aspects work together, that they serve each other, and so that they're different aspects of the human condition that to which those are meaningful, pertinent. Because if somebody is really can't relate to the idea of paritta chanting as being protective, if you look at the words, say the Mangala Sutta, what is the highest blessing? Mangala is like a lucky charm. It's an amulet or a protection. And so when in the Mangala Sutta that we recite as one of the parittas, if you read the advice, all the highest blessings, they're not about what's a good amulet. It's all about what to do to not make your life more difficult, what to do to live skillfully. Yeah. Don't associate with fools, associate with the wise. This is the highest blessing. That's the highest blessing is all about what you do and what you stop doing. So that that's a real protection. If you follow the advice, it's a real protection. So I feel it's important to hold things in those ways. So you're not trying to feed people superstition, but you're also ready to communicate with them in the in a language and in a mode that they can relate to.